Fidelito.
Hello, Fidel, Jr.
Hi.
That's a very good-looking puppy you have there. Is he yours?
No, it's somebody gave it to my father for a present.
Uh-huh. When do you think you'll be visiting us again?
Oh, well, I should lie. I think when I have a chance.
Well, will that be with the beard or without it?
Well, it's possible if I go soon to the United States with the beard. Because I am not thinking now to cut my beard. Because I am accustomed to my beard. And my beard means many things to my country. When we have fulfilled our promise of good government, I will cut my beard.
The first people who left, I mean, in the first days after the revolution, by and large were Batista supporters and members of the Batista government. Batista fled the island New Year's Eve of 1959, and many of his supporters followed immediately thereafter.
Those accused of murder and torture who didn't flee the country were brought to trial. The trials, however, were criticized in the U.S. media.
I was following on television the revolutionary trials that began right away, which were the beginnings of the problems with the United States. In fact, a lot of the CIA's people, or some of them at least, were on trial for having been murderers and torturers of Batista.
The same year he came to power, Fidel was invited to visit countries throughout Latin America. He made passionate speeches calling for unity among the peoples of that region. He proposed the creation of a Latin American market. Also in 1959, he embarked on a tour of the United States, hoping to promote a better understanding of the Cuban Revolution.
Did you ask for any economic assistance?
Not here. You in the United States are accustomed to see government coming for money. Not. I came for good relations, for good understanding, for good economical relations. We are now poor country, but in a rich, poor people, but in a rich country. What we want is to work in our rich country.
Vice President Nixon was sent to meet the new Cuban leader after President Eisenhower refused to see him. Nixon later wrote a memo describing Fidel as a communist who should be overthrown.
Cuba is an obsession with American leaders, and it really doesn't matter whether they're Democrats or Republicans. It's almost a psychosis. The United States is simply incapable of dealing rationally with Castro.
When Fidel got to New York, he had a warmer welcome.
Rodeado por la multitud, apretujado por el entusiasmo de miles y miles de personas, entra en la estación Pensilvania de Nueva York un joven abogado, alto y barbudo, que sabe hablar un idioma sencillo y valiente y que viste el uniforme de comandante del ejército rebelde cubano. Aquí esperan el mayor Wagner de Nueva York y su esposa, así como los altos dignatarios de la Babel de Hierro, para rendir homenaje al más ilustre visitante del momento, Fidel Castro.
Fidel gave a reception at the Cuban embassy.
Es la primera vez que él se pone el traje de gala. Se miró hacia el espejo y dijo que vaya, me quito esto, porque me parezco a Tito, chico. Termina la recepción y no aparecía por ningún lado. Hasta que como a las 2 de la mañana llegó y nosotros sentados allá abajo en la embajada esperando. Digo, ¿dónde tú estabas? Dice, no, me fui al barrio chino a comer sopa china. En Nueva York solo esa noche, esas cosas que tiene.
In 1960, he traveled to the United States for a second time to address the General Assembly of the United Nations. When the manager of the Shelburne Hotel, worried about adverse publicity, asked him to leave, Fidel threatened to camp out on the grounds of the UN.
El dueño negro del Hotel Teresa, del barrio negro de Harlem, ofrecía el hotel inclusive gratuitamente, a Fidel y a sus compañeros de delegación. Inmediatamente Fidel dijo, vamos para el Hotel Teresa.
At the Hotel Teresa, world leaders visited him. Nasser from Egypt and Nehru from India. Black activist Malcolm X also called on him, as did the Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev.
Aquí Khrushchev le está diciendo a la prensa, en contestación a una pregunta de si Fidel era comunista, dice, yo no sé si Fidel es comunista, yo lo que sí sé es que soy fidelista.
On his return to Cuba, the first priority of Fidel's revolution was the redistribution of land through the Agrarian Reform Act. Under Batista, foreigners had owned more than 70% of the arable land. Most of the sugar industry was in U.S. hands. At first, quite modest land expropriations were proposed. They even included land owned by Fidel's family.
Fidel quería que fuera la primera. Mi padre decía, tengo un hijo estudiando para abogado para que le defienda los intereses. Y bueno, pues mire, el abogado fue el que firmó la ley de reforma agraria.
Besides land redistribution, the reform included health care, education, housing, and road building in rural zones.
Ya que nuestra reforma agraria afectó intereses de grandes compañías norteamericanas. A nosotros nos hacían la guerra por hacer la reforma agraria y en cambio después Kennedy estaba promoviendo la reforma agraria en América Latina para evitar revoluciones radicales.
Yeah, about a year after the agrarian reform was introduced, and some American properties, rural properties, the King Ranch and so forth, were nationalized, the Cuban government ordered the foreign refineries, two of which were American, to refine Soviet crude oil. I think their first inclination was to do it, but they were encouraged by the U.S. Treasury Department not to. So they refused. They would not refine the Soviet crude. The Cuban government then nationalized those refineries, the oil companies in Cuba. The United States retaliated for that by cutting off the Cuban sugar quota, and Cuba then retaliated for that by nationalizing all U.S. properties in Cuba. And in October of 1960, the United States imposed the embargo against Cuba. So it was sort of one step led to another.
Cuando Fidel lee el decreto más importante de la Revolución Cubana,
en su afán de controlarlo todo,
la emoción de Fidel es tanta que Fidel enmudece, pierde la voz. Y aquello fue una expectación tremenda porque era ante las cámaras nacionales e internacionales y Fidel mudo delante del micrófono. Y entonces Raúl, inesperadamente, toma el micrófono y continúa leyendo el decreto de expropiación de las grandes compañías norteamericanas en Cuba.
Porque se ha ido una voz por un momento, pero ahí está él y estará. Compañía Cubana de Electricidad. United Fruit Company.